What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey, joined by my friend and co-host Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you?
I'm doing good today. Thanks everybody for listening to us once again. I think Brian and I want to just talk about where we are with this whole COVID stuff. I mean, we're going into our third year, and I don't know. I think this weekend we just passed like 900,000 deaths in this country. I think that's the official count, and the people who are kind of in the know actually think that the numbers are much higher than that.
That's interesting. Okay, so people do think that the 900,000 is inaccurate.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me about that is you think at the beginning of it, like when all this was going on, many people didn't know what was going on, and many of the deaths were not counted because people just stayed home, in the very beginning of it. And then so you hear this one thing where people say it's undercounted.
That's what I was going to say. It's interesting that there is this dichotomy. There's no doubt about it.
Oh,
you get hit by a car accident or car, and that's a COVID death that they count, and blah blah blah. You hear it, everything.
Right. And that from what I understand, that stuff is not actually true. Like counting, a car accident or going into the hospital and somebody dies of a heart attack is counted as a COVID death. I mean, I actually have experience with that, and have seen that that's not actually true. I mean, the numbers are pretty written in stone for the most part. And if anything, they are undercounted. And I think once we know, we'll be able to get a better idea of what they are. I mean, I'm going based on the numbers, based on the CNN tracker, which says that we're over 900,000 now.
We just lost about half our viewership with your CNN drop.
I know, right? That's not the only news.
That's the problem. That's the problem with this society.
Yeah. Well, that is a problem, right? Because they're like, oh, okay. Well, he's getting his information.
Well, that's who I was going to ask is who are, when you say the people in the know, who are these people that you are referring to in general?
Well, we're talking about the CDC. We're talking about the World Health Organization. We're talking about experts, people that are more expert than definitely me or you.
Yes, indeed. And how would they not have a correct count? Just because, like you're saying, people not going to the hospital, and then we're just making the assumption that it is higher.
As far as I understand it, the count has to be a certified COVID death, and so a lot of people may not have been counted with that, especially in the beginning, and then also a lot of people staying at home, especially in the beginning. So anyway, I don't know all the ins and outs, but from what I understand, the numbers are probably undercounted. But even if they're not undercounted, I mean, 900,000, that's more people dying from all the U.S. wars combined. I mean, all of them combined together, 900,000 is more deaths. I mean, that's crazy. American deaths in all the wars. Like, I think the highest death count in a war was the Civil War, like 600,000.
Okay.
And then you count them all together, we're pretty much, that it's the highest death count. And this has happened in 3 years. Also with the, I think with the, with the AIDS epidemic, which is, still ongoing, started in the 80s. From my numbers, we have more deaths with COVID in 3 years than we have of people dying of HIV/AIDS, and that's been over 20 years. So that's correct.
I'm fact checking you, and
check me and check that. But anyway, that's nutty. And so you have to think like, okay, 900,000. Let's call that a million. There's like 330 million people in the United States. That means about 1 in 300 people have died from COVID, which probably means that everybody in the United States knows of somebody probably that has died of COVID. Certainly I have. And, being in healthcare, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a healthcare provider that doesn't know of somebody
Yes, indeed.
who has died from COVID. And so, this thing is so what did we hear from the beginning? What did we hear from the beginning? It's a hoax, for one thing. Like from the other, just naysayers, it's a hoax. We know it's not a hoax anymore, so we don't hear that much. It's a democratic propaganda machine. We also know that that's not happening. But the main thing is it's nothing more than the flu. And we know that that is absolutely not true. Oh, it's a whole lot more than the flu. And many of these people who have gotten COVID are now dealing with, other symptoms, the long COVID stuff. So that's a huge number too. That's probably, I think they're saying like a third of the people who have COVID also have long COVID. And, and these symptoms vary. I mean, they just run the gamut of fatigue, brain fog, joint pain.
We have an episode on long haulers.
Yeah, right. And I think we go over this. I think we speak a little bit about, what are things you can do to help with that. But it attacks every system in the body. So you have this whole myriad of symptoms. So that's a huge another set of people that are dealing with this.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because when you look at the death counts, and again, the official death counts, yay, the United States is number one. We have the most deaths in the world.
Yeah, I mean, ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is nutty. It's absolutely nutty when, we're the ones who basically rolled out the vaccine. We're the ones who, got the science going. We're the ones who did Operation Warp Speed. I got to say, thank you, Trump, for that. I mean, that was a great thing to get that rolling and get it out as fast as we could. But yet we have the highest death count. That's just nutty to me. And I think a lot of it is just deep-seated mistrust. I don't know. Maybe it's in the American zeitgeist that we just don't trust authority of any kind. And I'm just like banging my head. Where's the rationale for that? Like,
I think people would counter you with saying like the Tuskegee experiment, things like that.
Yeah. Or like, remember what they said about cigarette smoking, in the 1950s, doctors were smoking cigarettes and stuff like that.
Or I've definitely seen people call out, all the problems that like Johnson & Johnson fill in the blank antibiotic or health providing company has, whatever problems they've undergone.
Right. So when you have all that going on, not only that, then you have a handful of doctors or PhD people who are credentialed, and it's only a handful, but they have a very loud voice who, the latest was Dr. Robert Malone on Joe Rogan, who, was talking about how basically that the vaccines are harm, implying the vaccines are doing more harm than good and stuff like that. And so when the lay public hears that, it creates all kinds of confusion. And not only does it create all kinds of confusion, is that when the public actually goes and gets the vaccine, they've heard all of this like misinformation out there, or the complete opposite of what's being recommended by, government authorities or the US or, Dr. Fauci, at the federal level, or your local immunologist, or like
there's just so many points, it's hard to see through the weeds. And you're dealing with so many weeds that it's like, okay, especially for the layperson, right? And for somebody, and I get that. I actually get that. Like, if you're hearing like different points of view from people who in your mind are credentialed just as the ones who are more pro-vaccine, it can be confusing. And then if you go into it and you already have a bias against vaccines or masks or social distancing, then you're gonna it's like confirmation bias. You're gonna go and look for the information that confirms your beliefs. So you're gonna listen to
to these people. It's like the climate change stuff, it's like there's a handful of people who, put out information that needs to be evaluated, not necessarily saying that climate change is a hoax and have credentials, but are just saying, hey, let's look at this. And either the media gets a hold of it or somebody's guru online gets a hold of it and turns it into, no, it's not really happening. And so people, believe that it's not happening. That's like they confirm their bias. The thing that you have that, and then you roll out a vaccine, right? People who believe that when you get the vaccine, the nocebo effect, and nocebo meaning that when you get the vaccine, that you believe that it's likely going to create harm, and lo and behold, every little symptom and muscle ache and pain that you have is due to the vaccine. That's what you believe. On the opposite end of that is the placebo effect, where if you believe a medication is doing something good for you, then it's going to be more likely to have a beneficial effect for you and a healing effect. And both the nocebo effect and the placebo effect are very real. Those play a big role. And I think because of the misinformation with all the, the data or the call-ins to the vaccine adverse, events reporting system, the VAERS system, you get a lot of that. Not to mention, you also get a ton of that because everybody in the United States is being confronted with the vaccine, either got the vaccine or argue or saying that they don't. Everybody's heard about the vaccine. If you want a vaccine, you can go get the vaccine. So now you have the whole country. Pretty much we're at 70% of the country has been vaccinated at least once, I think, at this point.
Oh, wow.
So now you have the whole country who, depending on their belief or whatever, can't possibly have a nocebo effect with that. So you get these things going on. On the other hand, speaking of nocebo effect, there are people out there who will say things like, I think Dr. Robert Malone was one of them, and I see my colleagues do this too, where they'll post data and say, oh, there's been 20,000 deaths from the vaccine. First of all, that has not been documented at all. I don't know really where they're getting that from. They may be getting that from the VAERS data, but all that is a reporting system that, anybody who gets vaxxed, especially if you have that nocebo effect going on, and if it's somebody elderly, statistically that would have died, statistically speaking, would have died anyway, then that gets reported there, and then the propagandists get it and turn it into, oh, it's a COVID death. And that's just not true. But let's say it is true. Let's say that 20,000, let's say 100,000 people have died from the vaccine in the United States alone, right?
Okay.
I just look at being somewhat rational. I look at it like, okay, well, almost 1 million, we're at well over 900,000. 900,000 people died, most of them unvaxxed, and these people got the vax. Let's say, 100,000 died. I mean, what would you choose just with that information alone? I think I would take my chances with the vaccine, knowing what we know now. Yeah. But anyway, let's say it's 20,000. That none of that's been documented. It's at this point completely false that 20,000 people have died from the vaccine. Now, I don't want to downplay the side effects and to the vaccine. I've heard people, and I don't want to downplay like everybody who has a side effect of vaccine, it's a nocebo effect. I don't actually believe that. I've seen patients have some symptoms from the vaccine, more so than just the regular stuff like the sore arm, like fever, chills, aches, and stuff like that. So I have seen that. The nice thing about it, I've also seen, is that people get over it within a week or two. So that's good. There's a small number of people that may not get over that or still struggling with that, but the vast majority do. So so it's just like if you lay the cards out on the table and you're looking at it completely objectively, I just don't see any way around the positive benefits of the vaccine. So what are some of the downsides? Like what are some of the things that people say? Well, I hear this all the time is, well, there's I mean, forget the nonsense, like, there's a microchip in the vaccine or anything like that. But I hear like, well, there's there's certain ingredients in the vaccine that I don't know, whatever it can be, that are harmful. And when you actually go and look at the vaccine, there's nothing harmful. These vaccines, I mean, I think it's salt and water. The people may have an adverse reaction to the polyethylene glycol in there, which is the preservative, which helps it get into the cell. But other than that, it's just it's basically the spike protein, salt and water, and polyethylene glycol. This ingredients you could just look up on the CDC. Now, do you trust the CDC? Of course, I certainly do. I mean, that's who I go to for my information. I think it's irrational to think the CDC is out to do you harm. And if you're going to believe that, then you really need to connect the dots in a rational way to get that information out there, right? So it's a exercise in like human psychology from, the time this started to now, and how do you get people on board to, not only to help others, but certainly to help themselves. So anyway, I don't really, when I'm going through this whole thing, like for me personally, I understand the confusion that the layperson would have with this. I get it. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. It's been completely politicized. It should not have been politicized. And I want to say it's been politicized both ways. In a sense, but certainly it shouldn't have been politicized. Viruses are apolitical. They don't care whose team you're on, so to speak. They just care if they have a susceptible, vessel body to infect, and they're going to try to find the best way to do that. But where I do have a problem is with healthcare providers who are trained, and to me, it almost seems like who are trained in healthcare and should also know, at least abide by it. Don't you have this? I mean, like first principles for you as a healthcare provider, isn't it? One of them is first do no harm as a healthcare provider. Like being a doctor, being a healthcare provider, that's one of them. The other one is also know thy limitations, right? As a healthcare provider. So honestly, Bryan, I would like to say, I would like to believe it's completely irrational that I know all about, physical therapy. No, I don't. The reason why I would refer to you is because I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to do brain surgery because I'm not trained in it. I'm certainly not going to sit there and try to have a debate with somebody like Dr. Ohl at Wake Forest about how vaccines don't work, and I'm certainly going to go out of my way to listen to somebody who is, somebody who really understands how viruses work and how pandemics are and epidemics. They're trained in that. They've gone to school with that. Because to do otherwise is possibly doing harm not only to yourself but definitely to the people you treat. So there's a responsibility out there as a healthcare provider. If you have a big following, there's a responsibility out there, and it brings me to the point with this whole thing with Joe Rogan. I mean, I think Joe Rogan, he just does podcasts like me and you. Me and you've had guests on here where we may not necessarily agree with them or anything like that, but we've had them on there. We just have a discussion. We put the information out there. But if you have a big following, I even say a small following, even a following like ours, that you do have somewhat of a responsibility to try to get the information right, or to at least, call it out if it may not, if there's another opinion that goes with that. So, that whole thing where, Joe Rogan has every right to have anybody on his podcast, but I also think there's a responsibility to help, get the information right, especially when you have the number of people that are dying that have already died, not only in the United States, but all over the world, which, is what, like 6 million people.
Yeah, I guess here we go with the Joe Rogan thing, but
yeah,
I've been listening to Joe Rogan since I was 17 years old. Haven't been listening that much recently. I haven't listened to the podcast where all this I've seen it on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. People are freaking out and whatnot about that kind of stuff. And obviously completely agree he should be able to have whoever he wants to have on the show.
Right, no doubt.
But with that, it goes back to know thy limitations, which I feel like is really where I sit with all of this. I'm very trepidatious about giving my opinion. I don't have any facts. I don't know anything. I have an opinion. Other than that, I would refer to the, what do I want to say, kind of the consensus of what most healthcare providers think. And the good thing about healthcare or science in general is there's always not necessarily going to be a consensus, and you have to be educated enough to understand that and use that in a knowledgeable way. And what's frustrated me as I've watched Joe Rogan kind of grow and blossom into, you know, obviously like the, you know, a little bit smaller than our show. There's you know, it used to be, he used to have those types of people on, and it was very know thy limitations. And at the end of the day, he was like, yeah, I'm just, you know, I'm a comedian and I tell jokes, and here's someone with an opinion, and I'm not necessarily smart enough to discern between that. And then it started becoming a little bit more like he did have a stance, or he did kind of speak like he was educated. And that's something I brought up, not that he's not educated, he's educated in a variety of different ways, but there is something about going through the rigor of an academic program that kind of educates you on how academic programs are run, to the point where like studies and these international review boards, and like what these p-value means, and all the kind of stuff that goes behind studies that make you realize that this really can't be faked. And yeah, studies can be kind of twist and turned with p-values and different types of ways that they're run to state a specific case, but just not even, you know, just knowing your limitations, that you may not, you know, you don't necessarily know how to understand that stuff. And thus you have to refer to, you know, the consensus of people who can understand that stuff.
Right. So here's the thing. So I could sit there and read a study, right? As soon as I get to the statistical analysis of that study, I'm completely lost. Right. I mean, for the most part, I'm lost. Yeah. I don't understand it. And so therefore I put my faith in whoever wrote the study, or whoever did the study, their statistician did the right thing to get the data they found in that study. The thing about science is that it is great to have other objective opinions or results, or questions, I should say, questions about it. And that's the way science works. And you fine tune it, and you get in an objective measure that gets closer,
brings you somewhat closer to the truth.
Somewhat closer to the truth. So right. So basically, it's completely irrational for me. This is my opinion speaking. I think it's completely irrational for people to think science is just out there to propagate misinformation or propaganda, all as a result of just wanting to make more money. Haven't you thought that maybe science is out there to help humanity? I mean, at the very least, for that, to help humanity find some objective truth to what's going on in our world. And until we find otherwise, then the truth either gets better and more refined, but still it seems like all the data, all the experts, most handfuls seem to think that in general the vaccines are doing much more good than they are doing much more harm. So then if your layperson, mechanic, whatever, out in the world is listening to somebody that says otherwise, or hears some social media health guru who has no credentials at all, or even somebody, I forget the two names, but I know one is Dr. Robert Malone, and then there's somebody else who are the big names. But there's Dr. Sherry Tenpenny and Dr. Robert McCullough, MERCOLA, and then there's McCullough, MECCLOUGH, who I think is a cardiologist. When these people have these huge platforms like Joe Rogan or whatever, and they're putting out information, and it is misinformation. It's like if you're going to put out something that you believe, then you better really put some good data behind it, or at least get somebody else on the podcast, like Joe Rogan's podcast, like, I don't know, Dr. Oles here at Wake Forest University, or Fauci, or somebody who, or some immunologist, or
opinion.
A dissenting opinion who can really go point by point and say why that is wrong, because unfortunately it has cost lives. It's cost thousands of lives. And I hear people, I mean, how many when you get on social media or whatever, or see in the news, how many times have you seen somebody who is, I don't know, you see the picture and call it propaganda or whatever, they have the ventilator on, and their last words are, "I wish I would have gotten the vaccine," or, is ridiculous. I mean, I every week there's somebody else there saying that, and that's tragic. That's really tragic. To me, it is. And to me, it's not their fault. To me, it's the fault of people putting out misinformation or politicizing this whole thing, where lives are needlessly lost based on that.
I guess that's where I disagree, just to whose fault it is. But yeah, everyone's got a personal choice, and that's kind of why we do this podcast, is in a way, and that's the only hill I want to stand on, is just know thy limitations and make your best judgment for you and whatnot.
Right.
And it seems that getting vaccinated pretty much across the board is a good judgment for most people. And other than that,
and it's not, and it is for most people. I would say for 99% of the people, there are people that should not get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So this is where, so I had a long discussion with Jade, and this is where we diverge. And I think this is where me and you may diverge also. All right. Where do you, based on the number of deaths, go to being pro-mandate instead of against mandates? Where do you go from that? Like to me, I became pro-mandate way back in the beginning of this whole thing, just seeing the number of people that died. My brother is absolutely against mandates altogether. He says he's pro-vaccine, but he's definitely against mandates. He's kind of like, no, it's the individual's choice, and as soon as you take that away, then you become authoritarian, yada yada yada. But where do you draw where can you draw the line for that? Because let's say let's do a thought experiment. What if I mean, 900,000, 1 million people dead is huge to me. Okay, I mean, that's a big number. But let's say it was something as virulent as smallpox. Now we're 3 years in, and half the population in the United States is dead, and it's still ongoing because we have all this misinformation going out there. Are you pro-mandate then? When do you become?
Yeah, I know, it's a very interesting.
So Jay, my brother, and I think you would probably say no. It's still the individual choice. It's like you're taking away somebody's personal freedom. They should be able to do what they want to do, but then you're also, what about the other people who are just trying to survive? You're taking away their ability to go out into the world and live in a less harmful place with the less viral load being around and stuff like that. At some point, okay, so if you believe that, then what do you, then is it worth everybody dying for then, to not have the government say you absolutely need to get the vaccine?
Sure.
So for me, I'm just like, no, it's not. And what does a mandate mean? It's not, a mandate doesn't mean that the government is forcing you to get a vaccine. It basically means that we highly recommend that you get the vaccine, and all government institutions, and hopefully, and maybe they even bring in the private institutions, are recommending that everybody get the vaccine before you can be a patron at their business or into government activities and so on and so on.
Well, but it's not the case, feels like we're kind of already there, right? If that's the definition of a mandate.
Yeah, pretty much. That's I mean, it's not like, it's not like it's illegal to not get the vaccine. That's the thing.
Right.
It's just a mandate. It's a recommendation that you should get the vaccine, and then it's left up to institutions to basically enforce that. So I guess what my thing is where do you draw the line between your anti-vax sentiments and civic duty.
Yeah.
I don't know, but in that thought experiment, like I'm pro mandate, like way before we even hit this number, and unfortunately, me being a naturopathic physician or integrative doc or whatever, I get the people, and I don't know if you do, maybe you're more of a conventional setting than I am, but I get the people who search me out because they are very anti-vax.
Well, I am in Florida.
So, and I've had a number of people say, can you write me letters and so on to get out of the vaccine and, that type of thing, which, so there's a lot of,
so how do you feel about that then?
About what?
Writing a letter for someone in a variety of different instances, because obviously there are people, just like you mentioned, who necessarily should not get the vaccine.
Yeah, I think.
So where do you draw the line with that?
I take it case by case, and really, I think my main thing is, since it's a completely different vaccine, if you got the first COVID vaccine and you had a severe reaction that has been documented by the community or whatever, that then I would not recommend getting a significant. And when I mean a significant reaction, I mean like you go, anaphylaxis. You have to be, it requires
you're hospitalized
emergency
because of it, basically.
Yes, yeah, right. Then I draw the line there. Because all medicine, doesn't matter what it is, it depends on the person's individual biochemistry, genetics, their makeup, and the dose that you're getting. And doesn't matter what the medicine is, it can, for a small percentage of the population, it can do harm to people. There's no doubt about that.
For all medicines, that's true.
Yeah, pretty much for all medicine. Yeah. So there has to be some sort of documentation, and having a negative reaction to another vaccine, I don't like the flu vaccine or shingles vaccine. These are completely different types of vaccines. You probably should get the vaccine. It shouldn't be an issue for those people. And that's what I've seen in my clinic. But if you've had a bad reaction from the actual COVID vaccine, yes, then I would say probably don't get another one. I mean, you take it a case by case basis, right? I mean, there are people who would
counter your mandate argument, in my opinion.
Well, the mandate the mandate would apply to people who can get the vaccine, which is about 99% of the population, right? There's a small percent who absolutely cannot get that vaccine based on their health history, based on a bad reaction to a previous COVID vaccine, or maybe a vaccine that was similar. Maybe they have no immune system at all and just cannot get the vaccine. So yeah, it should be taken on a case by case basis. But for most of the cases that I've seen that have been asking for, letters or whatever, absolutely can take the vaccine, and should, because a lot of people were, I've had people come to me and say, well, I'm thinking about getting pregnant. I'm worried about the vaccine. That, what we find is people who actually get COVID are more likely to have, fertility issues and people not getting COVID. COVID affects every system in the body. So you're going to be, if you get COVID, it's more of an issue. And then if you get COVID while you're pregnant, that may be more of an issue, so on and so on. That's basically what we're seeing. So based on the data for that group of people who are trying to get pregnant or are pregnant, then it's, definitely talk to your doctor, but in general should get the vaccine, especially if you're healthy. But yeah, again, any vaccine, any medicine you take on a case by case basis. But I just, one thing that I'm really, really against is the religious exemption stuff. I mean, I just, that to me is, again, where's your sense of civic duty? Everybody has their own belief systems, their own worldview. It doesn't mean that everybody has to abide by your worldview or your belief system. If we know that it's going to help people not die from getting the vaccine, then absolutely. I mean, me personally, I don't really care about what you believe religiously. I just don't. That's again, that's my opinion, a very strong opinion, and I have a bias against that for many reasons. But to me, it's like, again, civic duty: first, do no harm.
And this is just pure ignorance, but I don't know of a religion where this would be against, your religious beliefs. Maybe that's just me being ignorant because I'm kind of similar to you, where it stands with our beliefs on religion.
Right. I just, there's certain denominations, sects within denominations that are against blood transfusions. I think if you're Jehovah Witness, or anything being put into your body. I know the what is it? The Amish are completely against vaccinations, based on their belief system.
And what does it look like, if you are going to mandate that those people were to get a vaccine? I know we're just doing a thought experiment here, but what would that look like? Because then at that point, would it not be forced? Someone who, you can't get a transfusion, or one of those kind of sects you're referring to.
Right. Well, again, a mandate is not forced vaccination. That's based on the definition. So you can't I'm completely against. It's a good thought experience. I'm completely against forced vaccination. I'm pro mandate. So let me put it that way. Like you cannot force somebody, no matter what their reason is, even though it may be completely ridiculous. You cannot grab them and tie them down and give them a vaccination. I mean,
to be honest, I think that's what most, including me, when they hear mandate, it's more or less that.
Right. That's what some people believe, and it's not that. So you have to get your definition of what a mandate actually is. You have to understand what a mandate actually is. It's not forced vaccination. Now you can say, well, now I can't participate in society because all the businesses have shut me out, and so on and so on. So essentially I can't fly anymore. Essentially it's forced. No, it's not. So the airline industry, certain businesses ought to kowtow to your beliefs, then, is what you're actually saying. They don't have their rights within their own business. Like I run a private business. I should have the right to do
whatever you please.
Well, to a certain extent, do whatever I please, especially if we're talking about life and death issues here.
Yeah.
I would go. I certainly don't. It's also
not a clear-cut life and death issue.
Right.
Just because doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to get it or whatnot.
Right. Well, that's true, but contrast it with this. Okay, so what happened like 5 years ago, whatever. I'm a baker, right? I don't believe in homosexuality, because the Bible says, from what I read in the Bible, it says it's bad. Therefore, I'm not going to bake you a cake. To me, that's bullshit. No, you have a duty to the public. If you're going to run a business in the United States, you serve everybody, regardless of what their beliefs or whatever is. It doesn't, you can't, to me, that's wrong. But when people are, when dying and being exposed, especially for me as a healthcare clinic, or somebody like a big company, like I was just at Costco the other day, hundreds of people, feel like thousands of people in there walking around, you congregate people, you're going to more likely get more and more people infected. So therefore they have this mask mandate. And again, they're not going to force you to put on a mask, but they also have the right not to let you in the store if you're not going to wear a mask either.
It is just, it's such a slippery slope, because it's not the same as the kind of homosexual cake baking incident you're discussing, but right. it's somewhat similar in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but I just feel like when you talk about life and death issues, and
I guess when it goes to the safety of others, it really is. Yeah. Right. And then I had that. I was actually came from maybe a Joe Rogan clip or something like that I was watching on YouTube, where I don't know if you heard of Jordan Peterson. He was, I guess he said something one time talking about exactly what we're talking about, where it's just like, if you're a business, kind of where can you draw the line, specifically kind of talking about that example, but not being able to serve like Black people or African Americans or whatever. And then he was talking about how, well, I guess they shouldn't have to. And then, you know, they should, like, he kind of switched up his opinion, because we all at this point do agree, and we've kind of, you know, progressed in that way to, obviously, you know, you shouldn't be able to refuse anyone based off like individual choices or things like that, or not even choices, but who they are.
Right.
And it is I guess it is if they're hurting other people, but that's where you would draw the line.
Yeah, when you have objective data that there's a possible threat or whatever to your patrons in the store or to you or anything like that, I think that's where you can enforce, you know, mandates within your business, and I think should. But when you have like ideological issues that, or social stuff issues that you don't believe in, but really doesn't really impact you in any way at all, you don't, you know, like like what happened in the South in the, you know, during the segregation years, you know, it's like that is ridiculous and is outrageous. And I feel like it is outrageous based on your religious beliefs to think that you can't serve patrons that have different ideologies than you. You know, especially when they're not harming you or anything like that in any way. And you can sit there and do backflips and everything to make it sound like they're harming you, but no, it's not like a virus getting infected and then then you spread it on to 6 people and then they spread it on to another 24 and then just explodes, and then there's a small percentage of those people who die. Yeah, that's a whole different, and those numbers 100%. Those numbers go, you know, explode after a while when you look at the deaths. So now we have about 1 in 300 people in the United States who have died from COVID, and most of those are unvaxxed. So now I know there are some people who probably don't believe this, but I think we can at least agree, most people can at least agree that a couple things, the vaccines seem to help prevent deaths, right? So in that way, they seem to help prevent deaths. They, with these variants coming on, they certainly don't seem to prevent you from getting infected, okay? But they do seem to help prevent deaths. And then based on that, the vaccines appear, based on objective data, to be doing a whole lot more good than harm, based on the information that we have now. So based on what we have now. So when you have those two things there, and you can agree with those statements, and I think most people who have strong anti-vax sentiments can at least agree somewhat with that, at least now, based on the data, that they seem to do more good than harm. We don't know what's going to happen in the past at all. We don't know what's going to happen in the past, but based on the data now, it seems like a rational person, and I know humans aren't rational, we go based on our emotion, but somebody who's really being objective would be like, yeah, the vaccine makes sense now. Like, that's the way science is. Science is an ongoing thing. So you can't wait. Well, let's wait and see 20 years from now what's going on. I mean, we're all in an experiment right now. The 20th century was an experiment. The 21st century is going to be an experiment. You know, you told me the other day, you woke me up with a text saying, you know, I hope you're okay because that fertilizer fire. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, first I heard about it. I go outside and I'm breathing. I mean, I could smell the thing. It's only like 8 miles away from me. I could smell the smoke, and is it? So, you know, what am I going to do? Go? I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of carcinogens in there. You know, whatever. Will that fertilizer fire cause like higher cancer rates around the area where it was? I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will at some point. We'll see that. Will this vaccine, which we have a lot of studies on this vaccine, cause problems down the road? Maybe it will. Maybe it shortened my life 10 years, me getting vaxxed and boosted. But I still am thankful for the decision now, for it helping to save people's lives now, you know, based on the science we know now. So
can I ask you also, Keoni, we were talking once about my wedding, and you asked me what I was going to do, like COVID protection, whatnot.
Yeah.
when, and we've talked about this to some degree, but when does this stop? Does it only stop, is this a kind of consistent thing for the rest of our lives? And I think this plays into what you were saying about it being an experiment. We're all kind of experimenting with that.
Yeah.
But, would it be if these mandates existed that we would feel more comfortable with, going back to the way things were, quote unquote, or, whatever that means? But it doesn't seem like, when you text me, we'll talk about COVID, I was like, man, I am sick and tired of this shit. I am over this. And it does just bring up a point of like, I feel like I'm speaking in circles because I don't want to necessarily say anything that's ridiculous, but we fully agree it's not the flu. 20,000 people died from the flu in like 2019. So it's definitely much different than the flu.
Right.
But as far as, how we interact and, we
or
all
where we go from here,
season comes and goes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Where we go from here. Like, okay, so you're getting married soon. So, where do you go from here? And you probably have all kinds of guests coming to your wedding where some people may have strong anti-vax sentiment, right? Which and are your family and your friends, your loved ones who may have that going on. But at the same time, you want to make sure that the wedding is safe for everybody who has the opposite types of view. Yeah, that's a great question. I think right now, I think we're at a point now where whether you're vaxxed or unvaxxed now, it seems like you're just going to have this isn't always true, but it's true for the vax, where you're just going to have a couple of days of sniffle or whatever, it's not like what it was at the beginning before we didn't even have a vaccine. That's a whole different ballgame. It's gonna be if you told me you were getting married during that time, say, Brian, I would not do that. Or if you're gonna do that, have it outdoor in a incredibly ventilated place. Require people to wear masks, or at least suggest it, and to recommend vaccination, which I think you ought to do anyway. But at this point in time, I think you have a good case to like just not even leave it up to the people. If they want to wear a mask, great. If they don't want to wear a mask, fine too. Because right now it's not as virulent, and I think there's a case to be made with that. And then also I'm fatigued with the whole thing. I mean, it sucks. It sucks that I have to put a mask on every time I go on to work, or every time I have to go into Costco. But I also put it on because I'm like, I don't know who I'm going to be coming in contact with. I may be an asymptomatic carrier. There may be somebody who's severely immunocompromised. I do not want it on my conscience that I let my guard down and possibly, cause somebody to get infected and get hurt tremendously. So, so that's where I go with that. I mean, I just, I went to a wedding back in October in Austin, and they just basically said, yeah, it'd be, wear a mask if you want to. We went there. Nobody's wearing a mask or anything. And sure enough, there was a minor COVID outbreak there. But again, nobody was hurt from it or anything. But there was one. So anytime you have people, congregating and in close quarters and all that stuff, and the ventilation isn't great, yeah, you're probably going to do that. But I hear your sentiment too. Where does it stop? Like, where do we go from here? Are we going to live our lives, with a mask? Are we going to, be wearing, I hear this from the other extreme, these, I don't know, like astronaut suits, so we're not exposed to anything. No, I mean, I don't want to live in a world like that either. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I think when we think about things like that, I feel like that's fantasy. I don't want to live in a world like that. I feel like that's fantasy. So the more rational thing is for me is, okay, so we're going through with this. If most people that can get vaxxed, do good hygiene, which would, may or may not include the masks, especially for events like a wedding coming up or anything like that. But you are going to certainly minimize the infectivity rates. So I think, having a wedding now based on where we are is, a fine, a good thing. I think it's a thing to do. It depends on the venue too and all that stuff. But I can tell you this, I mean, I'm coming. I'm not, depending. I don't know how many people you'd have there, but I'm certainly not going to go in there. I'm vax boosted. I feel pretty secure with that. I've been exposed a number of times. I've been tested. I have antibodies. I just don't feel the need to wear a mask unless you wanted all the guests to wear a mask, then I would. So I don't know where you guys are with that.
Yeah. I'm so damn libertarian. Live and let live. And right. If you want to wear a mask, please wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask.
I think that's probably a good thing to tell people. Say, I'm not gonna.
Well, it's just interesting because, just thinking about your pro mandate discussion and that sort of thing, at what point would you feel comfortable, is if we have these pro mandates instilled, is that when we're comfortable to not wear masks anymore, whatever, go to a concert and not wear a mask or whatever the case may be. Just,
well, I think you'd have to take what's going on and see what the infectivity rates are. And right now, with Omicron, the numbers are plummeting all over the United States, and people tend not to be dying from it, especially the vaxxed.
I think that point is a perfect summary of the entire conversation, which is what you said a moment ago, is that science is ever evolving and we have to take it. And that's why we have healthcare practitioners like you and I, because what we've done in our own little areas of expertise is digest the latest information, and then you have to apply it on an individual case-by-case basis.
Right.
And that's where the beauty of it is, and that's where caring for people is, and that's what we're all required to do, instead of sit here with our flag that is blue or yellow or whatever, mask or no mask or this or that, and really take it case by case, situation by situation. If I went to a concert right now, I'd probably wear a mask. If I went to an outdoor football game right now, I probably wouldn't wear a mask. And that's just my own, depending on that sort of thing, just depending on the situation. And I think that's just what we need more. And if anything, I hope that's what we did with the podcast, is just, be a more open.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, because on the other hand, and I do want to say this, I do want to believe, because I generally believe in most people are don't have bad intentions based on their beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that's a statement of fact. And I'm saying most people, 99.999% of the people. So the people who are very strongly anti-vax or against mandates, I also have to believe, on the other hand, that they are thinking that they're doing good for humanity by having those beliefs, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I just find it illogical when you see people dying. I just find that illogical. But again, people would say, but you know what? As soon as you let the government intrude and all that, you start seeing your freedoms taken away and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I don't see that yet. I mean, maybe you see that, but I just don't see. I see it as more of a civic duty and not taking freedoms away. I see it now as really taking more freedoms away from the people who can't get vaxxed, or highly sick, or who are elderly, who know that if they get the vaccine, they're more likely to have problems. And I also want to say this. I think as the science evolves, we're going to find that there's this whole notion, at least with my colleagues, that, well, hell, all you got to do is just be healthy and you don't have to worry about it. Take your vitamin D, C, zinc, and all that stuff, and it's no big deal. And to me, that's bullshit. I mean, it just is. It's like not in lieu of the vaccine. All that stuff. I'm not going to say that stuff doesn't help. It certainly does help. But I do know of people that are highly fit. Again, nobody in my close circle, but who are highly fit, who have gotten sick from the virus and who have died from it. So the whole, if you're just healthy argument doesn't make any sense to me. What makes more sense is some people have probably a genetic susceptibility to getting very sick if they catch the virus, and whereas others don't and won't get sick. And you see that across the board with all viruses. I mean, it's just the way, our DNA works. Everybody's genetically unique for the most part. And because of that, some people depending on what the virus is or illness are going to have a real hard time with it, whereas other people are not. So that whole notion there, especially when I hear it coming from healthcare providers, is ridiculous. And the other thing it does, it also, who determines what health is, for one thing? Like how are we defining health? I mean, nobody really knows what health means. I mean, we can certainly look at people and be like, okay,
we've done 180 podcast episodes trying to figure that out.
Right. Right. It's like, okay, are you healthy if you're 15% body fat? Well, not necessarily. I know plenty of people who have body fats lower than that who, have diseases, so how do you define that is basically, and then when you say stuff like that, in a sense, you're shaming people who may be deemed unhealthy by society's standards. So for example, somebody who you can look at and tell that they're obese, and basically, well, if you would just be healthy, you wouldn't die from the vaccine. I mean, how is that? Or how about this? Somebody who this is the other thing. How about cancer diagnosis, right? Oh, well, if you just ate your broccoli every day, you wouldn't get cancer. I mean, what a bullshit thing to say. And throwing guilt on people like that is just bad medicine. And it's not true. It has no basis in reality. I mean, the main risk factor for cancer, and it's a big risk factor for dying from COVID, is age. The higher the older you are, the more likely you're going to get cancer. And the more likely you're probably going to, if you get COVID, the more likely you're going to die from it. And why is that? Because your immune system doesn't work as well. Period. That's just based on age. Age is a higher risk factor than smoking, obesity, you name it, for getting most diseases. That's why we did that podcast on a few of the podcasts on aging. Like why doesn't the healthcare system work on slowing down the aging process? In the process, we actually will stop a lot of the diseases or slow them down, a lot by working on slowing down the aging process.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's it's, I think we're coming to the end of this. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of new variants coming out. I know. Have you actually been tested positive for it? I haven't been positive for it at all.
No.
Yeah.
I've done everything to get it, and
I've been
jokingly way.
Right. I've been working in healthcare. It's like it's kind of amazing to me. It almost seems to me like I know a few healthcare providers, and this is just, I have no data on this at all, but it almost seems to me that if you're a healthcare provider, and you're dosed in small amounts over time, like you definitely seem to build up some resistance, it seems. I mean, with the virus, it especially with Omicron, I think I read somewhere, like if you're in a room with somebody who's positive and you're in there for more than 15 minutes, you're highly likely to get it. So it all depends on the viral load and the dose that you're being exposed to, which nobody really knows. But it does seem to me that having small amounts of it does seem to afford you some protection. But I also tell people this, like I hear some of my patients say, well, it's unlikely I'm going to die from it, so I'm going to just go ahead and expose myself to it. Like maybe my daughter has, I'm not going to isolate, I'll just get it and try to get it over with and try to build up my natural immunity. That may be fine for some illnesses that we know and have more science on, but you're not just talking about getting over it in 2 or 3 days, and maybe you will, but a lot of people have these long COVID symptoms, and what we're finding is that there are, this virus seems to attack every system. So down the road, there may be, neurological issues, there may be digestive issues, there may be fertility issues, so on and so on, which we're starting to find now. So it's like you really want to do your best to try not to get it if you can.
Yeah.
There is data that shows I'm sorry, but let me just finish this one last point. There's data that shows that if you get vaxxed and then after the vax, you also get COVID, you tend to get over it easily, but then you afford stronger immunity from compared to people who've been triple vaxxed like me. Well, I don't know how true that is, but it does seem to getting vaxxed and then getting it naturally seems to afford some better protection.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. To me, the main thing I would hope people would take away from it is from this discussion, science and like these studies, and when you get the consensus on a side that's backed by science, it's more so like the house, and you trying to go against that is the one-off gambler gambling in the casino.
Right, with
And
the odds deeply against you.
Yeah. The house typically wins.
Yeah.
And the house knows what they're doing, and sometimes the gambler does win the car, but more often than not the house wins.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. And I think people need to, I don't know, we all just need to reassess ourselves too. Where's the sense of civic duty? And then, but beyond that, where is the faith that people have in humanity in general, right? Yeah, people say I don't want to live in a world of mandates, but I go, well, I don't want to live in a world where I mistrust everyone that I meet. I may run into somebody where I put too much trust in them and be harmed by that. But, being in medicine and knowing the rigor that people who study this issue, viruses and diseases and stuff like that, they do these things because they're trained in doing it. So I'm going to put more faith in what they tell me, the house, instead of, I don't know, my
your buddy who gambles on the weekend with a cigarette on his mouth.
Right. So anyway, I don't know why. I guess I need to get on my soapbox this morning, but thank you for letting me do it, Bryan.
It ended up being fun. I was like, oh God, I'm so tired of COVID. It ended up being fun.
Should we make this our last COVID podcast?
No, we shouldn't say that. We shouldn't say that. God knows what's going to happen in the future.
That's right. Okay.
I would like to say that, but yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
But we're open to the science, and we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. And if it ends up needing to be talked about,
the story changes. The story changes completely. I hope my biases are not so set in stone that I can at least come back if I'm wrong and go, you know what, I was wrong, and I'm sorry I was wrong. I mean, I could at least say that. By the way, that's one of the things I love about Joe Rogan. He did apologize, even though he went on to say something crazy and stupid after that. But he did apologize. And I don't know. I like people who can apologize, who can just say, look, I made a mistake, or I can do better. I can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Until next week. Be well.
Take care, everybody.
Keoni, how much have you heard about this Uyghur situation? That's what I think of when I start thinking of like surveillance states. I haven't turned off the recording and be a little bonus conversation, but have you heard about the Uyghurs in China?
Oh, yes.
It's like sect of Asian Islamic followers or Muslims that are essentially being,
annihilated.
Genocide. Yeah. And it just, I watched a bunch of stuff about it, and they're really, the main thing China did supposedly is collect all this biometric data and really do the surveillance state type stuff, to where they've taken, these people's whole lives apart. And they're basically, if they are not in these camps or not sequestered away, they're living in these very, very small sects of China, kind of constantly followed. And it just,
so are they doing that because of their religious beliefs or
to my knowledge, it has something to do with.
Well, you know what else China's doing? This is the other thing. We should have talked about this, but China, basically, you're talking about 1 billion people there, right? And I just had a couple friends of mine move to Hong Kong. From here, and there are certain areas in China that you are gonna have to deal with the threat of being shot if you're out on the street during a COVID lockdown. That is like extreme. Shit. Yeah, that's really extreme. However, I want to put it that, and that sucks. I don't want to live in a world like that. Okay. However, now let's look. You have 1 billion people. You probably have like 100 times more with living in a square mile than we ever do. You're more likely to have COVID spread throughout the country quickly than you would here in the United States. And their numbers, at least the numbers that we know, are significantly, they're almost zero compared to what we have, based on their authoritarian mandates that they put into place.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, I don't want to live in that, but also what are the benefits of that kind of thinking, right? So I even go to this. So here's another, we could talk about this. In Saudi Arabia, shoplift. If you actually shoplift, the punishment is so severe that it could lead to your death. So guess what happens? Nobody fucking shoplifts, nobody does. So if you choose to live in that country, on one hand, it's very safe to walk out on the streets. It's very, very safe, but it's also diabolical what could happen to you if, whatever. I mean, could you imagine? What if you got framed for something like that,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is definitely not a bridge I want to cross.
Right. In Singapore, which is, I consider a free country, I think
the drug
situation.
I think
the drug situation, but also I don't think you're allowed to chew gum because there's like, if you spit it on the street, it creates a problem. So, and there's severe punishment with that, or whatever you deem drugs, you could die from it. But again, there's no, compared to what the United States is going through, there's no drug problem in Singapore. There's no crime problem in Saudi Arabia. There's no real crime problem in Singapore either. So it's like, what's the society that you want to live in? The one thing I would say, though, is if you live in a society like that, or a society like the United States, you as a person, a citizen of the world, should be able to move when you want to wherever you want to, based on the type of country that you want to live in. And I think there is some type of world mandate or rule that everybody, no matter where they're from, again, we'll take North Korea out of the equation because it isn't true for them, but for the most part, can move to any part of the world that they want to, especially if they feel like they're being persecuted.
Certainly not true for the Uyghurs.
No, it's not true for them either. Right.
So,
but
yeah, that's a slippery slope. And if you choose, that's one thing to live in an area, but most of us are born somewhere, and that's where you live your life.
Right. Yeah, that's where you live your life, and it takes a lot of, capital and effort to get out of your situation wherever you are. So that's the other thing that you have to deal with, and unfortunately, me and you, I certainly consider it lucky. I think you do too. We were lucky enough to be born in the United States. For all its craziness, we're lucky enough to be born here, as opposed to being born in, I don't know, Ethiopia or Sudan, where the country is just war torn, and there's no hope. There's no real hope of you getting out of that situation. Right. And the only hope you may have is to, I don't know, dangerously try to cross in a fucking, inner tube, cross the Mediterranean, to get
do something
somewhere.
And then at risk of some of those punishments.
Right. And then when you get there, you're probably going to be sent back anyway. I mean, when it gets that bad, I think, you have to have some form of compassion when you were one of the lucky ones to be born. I mean, I didn't choose to be born here. I could have been born anywhere. You didn't choose to be born here. You won a lottery. So did I, as far as this goes.
Yeah.
You won a lottery to, go to college and educate yourself. I won a lottery with that too. And so my thing, when I hear
opposite of a lottery where I owe.
Yeah. Well, yes, in a sense it is.
But yes, I hear you too.
Now you owe the rest of your life. Anyway, we should do a podcast on this too and just talk about it.
All right, I'll turn this off. It's just an interesting